The morning my daughter told me I was being selfish, I was standing in my own kitchen making her coffee. Not her kitchen, mine. The house I had lived in for 31 years. The house where I raised her. The house where her father took his last breath in the bedroom down the hall. I was standing at the counter in my robe, measuring out the grounds the way she liked, 2 extra scoops, a pinch of cinnamon, and she walked in without knocking, sat down at my table, and told me that I needed to stop living so large. Those were her exact words. "Stop living so large, Mom." I didn't say anything. I finished making the coffee. I set the mug in front of her, and I stood there at my own kitchen counter and listened to my daughter explain to me, in a very calm and reasonable voice, that a woman my age, living alone in a 4-bedroom house, with a car that was only 3 years old and a standing appointment at the salon every 2 weeks, was being irresponsible. That I should think about downsizing, that the equity in this house could go a long way toward helping her and my son-in-law get out of the financial hole they were in. The financial hole. I almost laughed. I nearly set down my own mug and laughed until the tears came, because I was the one who had been filling that hole, quietly, for 8 years. I was the one who had been patching it from the bottom while they kept digging from the top. But I didn't laugh. I nodded. I said I would think about it. And after she left, I sat at that kitchen table for a long time, staring at the coffee ring she had left on the wood, and I thought about every single thing I had done for them without ever once being asked to stop. Let me tell you how it started, because that part matters. When my daughter married my son-in-law 11 years ago, I thought I was gaining a son. He was charming when he wanted to be easy, smile, firm handshake, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order the first time and never again. My daughter was so happy. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, chasing fireflies in the backyard of this very house. I wanted that happiness for her more than I wanted almost anything. 3 years in, the business my son-in-law had started was struggling. He came to me directly, sat across from me at this same kitchen table, and asked if I could help them get through a rough patch. He said they just needed a few months of breathing room, maybe help with the mortgage payment while things stabilized. He looked embarrassed, asking. My daughter held his hand and looked at the table. I said yes. Of course I said yes. My husband was still alive then, and we agreed together you help family when family needs help. That is what you do. But the rough patch didn't end. It stretched. Months became a year, then 2. My husband passed away from a heart attack in the spring of what I thought would be the year things got better for all of us. And somehow, in the fog of grief, in the haze of learning how to live alone at 64, the helping just continued. The mortgage payment, then the car payment when my daughter's transmission failed. The school tuition when my granddaughter Lily started at a private school that my son-in-law insisted was the only acceptable option. The credit card they asked me to be a cosigner on, just temporarily. The home equity loan they needed me to back. I never sat down and added it up. That was my mistake, and I know it now. I didn't want to see the number. Seeing the number would have made it real in a way that hurt too much, because seeing the number would have meant asking myself questions I wasn't ready to answer about my daughter and about myself. It was my neighbor Grace who finally made me look. Grace is 72, sharper than anyone I have ever met, and she has been my closest friend for 19 years. She brought me a casserole 2 days after my husband's funeral and has been checking on me ever since. Last spring, she came over for lunch and found a stack of statements on my counter that I hadn't opened in 3 weeks. She asked, very gently, if she could help me sort through the paperwork. I said yes. I made us tea, and we sat together at this kitchen table and opened every envelope. When we were done, Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dorothy, do you know that you have 26 recurring payments going to their accounts?" 26. Not counting the larger, irregular transfers. Not counting the times I had written a check at the kitchen counter while my daughter stood next to me, telling me it was just this once. The total, just from the last 3 years alone, was over $200,000. I had to put my hand flat on the table to steady myself. After Grace left, I called my daughter. I told her we needed to talk about the financial arrangements. I told her that I had been going over my accounts, and I was concerned about my own retirement security. I said it carefully, gently, the way you say a hard thing to someone you love when you are hoping they will meet you halfway. She told me I was being dramatic. She said I had more than enough, that it wasn't like I had expenses, that I was living alone in a big house with no mortgage. She said, and I remember this clearly because I wrote it down afterward, "Mom, you have everything you need. Why are you making this about money?" I let it go. Because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and I had spent 40 years making sure she never had to feel afraid or uncertain about anything if I could prevent it. Letting go was a habit I had been building her whole life. That was 14 months before she sat at my kitchen table and told me to stop living so large. After she left that morning, I drove to Grace's house. I sat in her living room and I told her everything, the conversation, the suggestion that I sell my home, the way my daughter had said it, like it was a reasonable thing, like I was the one being unreasonable for wanting to keep the house I had lived in for 3 decades. Grace listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "What are you going to do?" And for the first time, I actually knew the answer. I did not go to my daughter and announce anything. I did not have a dramatic confrontation. I made an appointment with my financial advisor on a Thursday morning, and I sat across from him and told him I needed to understand exactly what I had given and exactly what I had left. We spent 2 hours going through everything, the total, across all 8 years, including the loan cosigns and the credit card balances I had quietly absorbed, and the recurring transfers I had set up, like a private utility bill I paid every month. The total was $340,000. I sat with that number for a long moment. Then I asked him what I needed to do to protect what was left. Over the next 3 weeks, I made changes. Quietly, carefully, with the help of my financial advisor and an estate attorney that Grace recommended, I stopped 26 automatic transfers on a single Tuesday afternoon. Not one at a time, not with a warning call, not with an email. I sat at my computer, went through each one, and canceled them. It took 40 minutes. I watched the list get shorter and shorter until the screen showed nothing pending, nothing recurring, nothing going anywhere except staying with me. I changed my will. Everything that I had previously designated to my daughter and my son-in-law, I redirected into a trust for my granddaughter, Lily. Lily was 14, quiet and serious, the kind of girl who always hugged me at the door and once spent an entire afternoon helping me reorganize my bookshelves just because she noticed they were bothering me. She had nothing to do with any of this. She deserved to have something untouched waiting for her when she was ready. Then I waited. It took 4 days. My son-in-law called first. He didn't start with hello. He said there was some kind of error with their accounts and he needed me to look into it. His voice had that particular flatness that I had learned meant he was trying to control something. I told him there was no error. There was a pause, and then he asked me what I meant. I told him I had made some adjustments to my finances and that the recurring transfers had been discontinued. He asked me when I had planned on telling them. I told him I was telling him now. There was a silence on the line that lasted long enough that I counted to 7 before he spoke again. Then he told me that I was being unbelievably selfish, that I had responsibilities, that they had built their lives with the understanding that I was a part of their financial foundation. Their financial foundation. I thought about my husband, who had worked 2 jobs for 6 years so we could pay off this house and save for retirement. I thought about the money we had set aside carefully, year by year, so that I would be all right after he was gone. I thought about standing at this kitchen counter in my robe, making my daughter's coffee, and I said to my son-in-law, very calmly, that I understood he was upset, and that I was sorry for any difficulty the change would cause, and that I wished them both well. Then I hung up. My daughter called 20 minutes later. She did not sound angry. At first, she sounded confused, which was almost harder to hear. She asked me why I would do something like this without talking to her. I reminded her that I had tried to talk to her 14 months ago, when I called after going through my accounts with Grace, and that she had told me I was being dramatic. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that was different. I asked her how. She didn't answer that. Instead, she told me I was hurting my family, that I was making a choice to hurt the people who loved me. I thought about all the years I had told myself that the help I gave her was love, and that the help she accepted was love returned. I thought about when that had stopped being true, and whether it had ever been true at all, or whether what we had built together was something that only looked like love from one direction. I told her I loved her. I told her I would always love her. And I told her that loving someone and funding their life were two different things, and that I had spent a long time confusing them. She hung up before I finished the sentence. They called 6 more times over the following week. I answered twice. Both times the conversation went the same way, demands disguised as hurt feelings, pressure dressed up as concern. My son-in-law pointed out that they had made decisions based on my support. My daughter said I was abandoning them. The last time I answered, she told me that she couldn't believe the woman I had become, and I thought, quietly, that I couldn't believe it had taken me this long. After the 6th call, I stopped picking up. It was Lily who came to see me, not with her parents alone. She drove herself, which she had only recently gotten her license to do, and she parked carefully in my driveway and knocked at the front door with both hands jammed in her jacket pockets. I opened the door, and she looked at me with those serious eyes and said, "Grandma, I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I brought her inside. I made her hot chocolate the way she had liked it since she was 5 years old, with a little extra vanilla and marshmallows that I kept in the pantry specifically for her visits. We sat at the kitchen table together, and she asked me, carefully, what had happened. I told her the truth, not the complicated financial version, but the human version. I told her that I had been helping her parents for a long time, that it had grown into something bigger than I could sustain, and that I had made the decision to stop. She didn't say anything for a while. She turned the mug in her hands. Then she said, "I think you did the right thing, Grandma. I think you should have done it sooner." I reached across the table and held her hand. She let me. After she left, I sat in the quiet of my house, still mine, and I let myself feel the full weight of everything all at once. The grief that had been waiting under the anger, the loneliness of realizing that the relationship I thought I had with my daughter was not quite the relationship that existed. The strange, uncomfortable relief of no longer pretending. I am not going to tell you it was easy. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life in a different way than the weeks after my husband died, but hard in a way that required something from me, a kind of steadiness I had to build deliberately, hour by hour. I talked to Grace almost every day. I took walks in the morning that I had been meaning to take for 3 years. I called my estate attorney and confirmed the trust documents for Lily were finalized. My daughter and I have spoken twice since then. The first conversation was strained and short. The second was longer, and there were moments in it that felt, briefly, like the possibility of something real. I don't know what happens next with her. I love her the way I have always loved her completely, without being able to help it, the way you love someone you watched learn to walk. But I know now that love does not require me to disappear into it. I am 68 years old. I live alone in my house. I have my garden and my books and Grace next door and Lily, who calls me every Sunday evening and tells me about her week in that thoughtful, careful way of hers. I have a retirement account that is intact for the first time in 8 years. I have mornings that belong entirely to me. A few weeks ago, I was sitting on my back porch in the early light, drinking my coffee made exactly the way I like it, not the way anyone else likes it. And I thought about the moment in my kitchen when my daughter told me to stop living so large. I looked at my garden. The roses I had planted the year my husband and I moved in, overgrown now and beautiful. The bird feeder I had been meaning to refill and had finally refilled, the light coming through the oak tree the way it did every morning, falling across the porch steps in long, warm lines. I thought, if this is living too large, then yes, I will keep living too large. I thought about the $340,000, and I let myself feel the sadness of it, the real sadness, not the angry version, but the quiet one that lives underneath. $340,000 is not just money. It is years of my husband's work and mine. It is the trips we didn't take, and the things we didn't buy, and the careful, unglamorous discipline of two people building a life together. I grieve that. I am allowed to grieve it. But I am still here. The house is still mine. Lily has a trust waiting for her when she turns 25 that her parents cannot touch. And I have, finally, at 68 years old, learned the difference between being generous and being a resource, between being loved and being used, between a family that holds you and a dynamic that only works if you stay small enough not to take up any room. I did not stop loving my daughter. I stopped paying for the version of her life where I didn't exist except as a line item. Those are not the same thing. It took me 8 years and $340,000 to learn it. I will not spend another 8 years forgetting it.